How did a wedding venue manager accidentally reveal the truth that changed everything? I wish I could start this story with some graceful introduction about my career in the wedding business, but the truth is, this particular event still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. My name is Sarah, and I've been managing weddings for a venue in a Midwestern city for nearly 8 years now. You might be picturing me as that enthusiastic organizer who absolutely loves romance, flowers, lace, and everything that comes with walking a couple down the aisle. I was that person once, glowing with optimism and brimming with excitement whenever a new set of lovebirds came in to plan their day. Over time, though, I've learned that weddings aren't just about confetti and toasts. They can be battlegrounds for family feuds, secret revelations, and emotional implosions. Nothing prepared me for what happened at Emily and Derek's wedding. I still remember the morning it all began. It was early November, the kind of day that's half winter, half autumn, with a chilly wind but bright sun shining. I arrived at the venue at around 8 in the morning, double-checking the floral arrangements, the table layout, the sound equipment, standard procedure for me. We were set to host a fairly large wedding with around 200 guests, a number that wasn't extraordinary but definitely kept everyone's hands full. In the days leading up to it, I had heard bits and pieces from my staff about some tension brewing in the families of the bride and groom. One of my assistants mentioned that she overheard the bride's father in a phone argument with someone, saying he wasn't going to let any nonsense ruin the day. I shrugged it off at first. Tensions happen all the time. Parents can get overprotective. Maybe he was talking about the bar tab, or a friend who liked to drink too much. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary, but there was a moment that same morning, around 9:30 or so, that made me feel the first sting of dread. A young woman, Katie, who was Emily's maid of honor, showed up looking pale as a sheet. She pulled me aside, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. "Sarah," she said, in this trembling, urgent voice, "do you have a minute?" Of course, I nodded, stepping over with her to a quieter corner of the foyer. Katie leaned closer, whispering so softly I had to tilt my head to catch her words. "Is there any way to keep some personal documents off the table? I mean, sometimes for these ceremonies you have a binder with forms and all, right?" I told her yes. We keep copies of the marriage license for reference, sometimes a small folder with the couple's details, order of events, vendor contacts. She pressed her lips together like she was trying to figure out how to frame her question. "If you see any extra papers, just don't show them to anyone, especially not in front of the families." Naturally, I was confused, but also used to the fact that folks can have all kinds of reasons for wanting something hidden. Maybe an old divorce decree, maybe some financial documents they didn't want the in-laws to see. I gently told her that I keep everything secure and private, which is true. She thanked me, then hurried away. I thought it was strange, but part of me assumed it might be about money or some personal matter. Little did I know just how explosive that personal matter would turn out to be. Emily, the bride, arrived not long after that, her hair pinned up in a gorgeous loose bun, wearing a satin robe over her slip dress. She had a big smile on her face for my staff, but I saw the look in her eyes, a mix of excitement and panic. Even the smallest question like, "How are you feeling?" made her eyes dart left and right as she muttered, "Nervous, just want everything to be perfect." She barely mentioned her family, just asked if there was a private space she could finish getting ready in, and I led her to the bridal suite. Usually at that point, the father or mother of the bride wanders around, checking decor or wanting to see the main hall, especially if they're paying for part of it. But I noticed Emily was alone, except for her maid of honor and another bridesmaid who arrived with the dresses. That was my second clue that something was off. Emily's parents were financing a good chunk of the event, but they were nowhere to be found on the day of, at least not in the early hours. Derek, the groom, arrived a bit after 10. I have to say, on the surface, they were a very photogenic pair. He was tall, had that easygoing grin, kind eyes, a guy you'd see playing frisbee in the park on a Sunday with friends. Emily was more reserved, but absolutely radiant in that poised classical way, like she'd been preparing to be a bride for years in her. They seemed in sync. The quick side glances, a soft laugh when he teased her about something. But the tension was still thick in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that behind those affectionate gestures, there was a roiling undercurrent of stress. He pulled me aside at one point to ask if any unexpected guests had arrived. When I asked who he meant, he just said, "Let me know if some guy named Miles shows up." It wasn't a name on our guest list. I double-checked the computer. No one was registered by that name. Derek nodded but looked uneasy. So we carried on with the normal routine. The florists had set up these breathtaking white roses with eucalyptus sprigs all around the ceremonial arch. We had rows of gold-trimmed chairs lined up for the guests, plus a lavish table arrangement for the wedding party. Everything looked exquisite. By noon, the caterers were preparing hors d'oeuvres in the kitchen. The day was well on its way to being a success, at least by the standards of my job. That is, until Derek's father Mark and Emily's mother Linda both arrived, within minutes of each other, giving me this swirl of awkward tension right in the front foyer. Mark was a large man with a serious face, crisp navy suit, big handshake. Linda was dressed in a deep purple gown that complemented the wedding colors, but her face was stiff with nerves. They didn't talk to each other, but I caught Linda glancing over at Mark with this look of almost apology. It's hard to describe, like she recognized him but didn't want to. Mark asked to see the seating chart. Linda pretended not to notice. I tried to diffuse the tension by talking about the centerpieces, leading Mark into the main hall so Linda could hurry away upstairs to the bridal suite. The moment we stepped into the main hall, Mark turned to me and said, "You do realize this wedding shouldn't be happening, right?" I froze. "Excuse me?" He sighed as if exasperated. "No offense to you and your staff, but I don't see why Derek and Emily are forcing this. You wouldn't understand, but some truths should have come out a long time ago. Now it's too late." I had a lot of follow-up questions, but it wasn't my place to pry. Instead, I tried to reassure him that everything was under control, though in my gut I sensed big trouble. He just gave me a flat nod. "If you see Miles, give me a heads up," he added before he walked away. There was that name again. Miles. I pulled up the guest list on my phone. Absolutely no mention of a Miles anywhere. I was about to go check on the bride again when I heard raised voices outside, near the side entrance. My assistant Laurel ran up to me. "Sarah, I think Emily's father just got into an argument with the officiant." Great, I thought. The officiant was a friendly local pastor we worked with often, a mild-mannered man who rarely got flustered. Why would Emily's father be yelling at him? I made my way to the side entrance, but by the time I got there, the father, his name was Henry, had disappeared inside with a friend. The officiant, Pastor Roberts, looked shaken. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying not to sound too frantic. He rubbed his forehead. "I'm not sure what's going on." He was just asking if I'd verify certain names or if I'd mentioned certain things in the ceremony. He seemed angry that I might say something about a united family under God. He said, "This family's never been united and I'm tired of lying." Then he stormed off. Another puzzle piece. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a spider web, seeing all these connecting threads. Miles, an uninvited guest, some deep resentment about false unity, documents that needed hiding. But I had a job to do, so I told the pastor not to worry, that sometimes parents get emotional. Inside, my pulse was picking up speed. I just wanted the ceremony to go smoothly. Get these two married, let them have their dinner, their first dance, their wedding cake, the usual. The real meltdown, of course, happened at the worst possible moment, right after the vow exchange, when everyone was leaning forward in their seats, dabbing eyes with tissues, cameras flashing. There were about 200 guests, elegantly dressed, a hush in the hall, the chandelier lighting up the floral arch behind Derek and Emily. They said their heartfelt vows. Emily's voice cracked just a bit, and I could see how deeply she cared for Derek. They exchanged rings. Everyone clapped. The officiant was about to pronounce them husband and wife. That's when the father of the bride, Henry, loudly cleared his throat from the front row. I watched him stand up, ignoring the outraged look on Linda's face as she tried to tug him back down. "Wait," he said in this shaking voice. "I can't let them do this without telling the truth." The entire room seemed to stop breathing. The officiant froze. Derek looked over at Henry, confused. Emily's eyes went wide. I could see in her gaze a silent, "No, Dad, not now, not here," he continued, addressing everyone. "I've kept my mouth shut for too long. You all think I'm Emily's father? Well, guess what? I wasn't even around the day she was born. I left Linda right after I found out." He broke off, maybe realizing he was going too far, or seeing the shock on Emily's face. Linda jumped up, tears in her eyes, and cried, "Henry, stop!" People all around the room started murmuring. Derek turned to Emily, no doubt confused. I, out of sheer instinct to keep the ceremony from total derailment, took a step forward, wanting to calm everyone down. I said, "We can handle any family matters after the official pronouncement, please. Let's keep the focus on the bride and groom's." Then, for whatever reason, call it nerves or stupidity, I added, "It doesn't change the fact that Emily loves Derek, or that she has a father figure in her life, whether that's you or someone else." The second those words were out of my mouth, I felt like I'd thrown a lit match onto a gasoline-soaked floor. The entire crowd pivoted toward me. Henry's eyes blazed. Emily's face turned a bright red, and she whispered my name in disbelief. Linda closed her eyes, covering her mouth. People started shouting. "Someone else? What does that mean? Is Henry not the real father? Oh my God, did Emily know? Is Henry paying for a wedding for a daughter who isn't his?" Linda burst into tears, trying to drag Henry away, begging him to stay quiet. He shook her off. "Why don't you tell them?" he yelled, pointing a finger at Linda. "Tell them who you slept with before we got married. Or should I do it?" It was horrifying. Emily stood at the front, tears rolling down her cheeks, looking from her father to her mother, while Derek tried to wrap an arm around. The officiant tried calling for calm, but nobody was listening. People from both families were yelling. Half the guests were rising out of their seats, some pressing closer, some backing away. It was pandemonium. Henry took a deep breath, like a man ready to blow everything up, and shouted, "Fine. Linda was pregnant with Emily before we ever said, 'I do.' And guess what? That pregnancy wasn't mine. I found out when Emily was just a baby, but Linda begged me not to ruin her reputation or take away her chance at a normal life. So I disappeared after we divorced, but now she's dragged me back here so I can pay for a wedding. Pretend to be father of the bride. It's all fake." The reaction was electric. Some older relatives gasped. A few close friends looked like they might faint. Emily stared at Linda, no doubt remembering or suspecting that her mother had withheld this her entire life. Linda was sobbing, shaking her head. "I never wanted this to happen. I wanted Emily to have a good father figure, to never know about that one mistake. It was so long ago. Henry, I just needed your help to pay for this wedding. We never told her because we thought she'd be better off not knowing the truth about—" She stopped abrupt, glancing at Derek, almost in terror. That's when Mark, the groom's father, stood up. Everyone's attention swung to him as if pulled by a magnet. "So that's it then," he said bitterly. "Emily's father is that scumbag Miles, right?" A wave of murmurs. Derek's mother, Sharon, who'd been quiet until now, jumped to her feet and tried to pull Mark back into his seat, whispering something urgent in his ear. Mark ignored her. "Linda, is that the truth? Miles is her father, the same guy who left Sharon high and dry?" Linda's face was a mask of anguish. She looked from Mark to Sharon, then at Emily, and gave a small nod, tears streaking her cheeks. People started shouting again. Derek was wide-eyed, focusing on his father. "Dad, what are you talking about? Did you know about this?" Mark scowled. "I suspect." Then, to the entire room, he declared, "That's why I told Derek not to go through with the marriage. For all we knew, he could be marrying the daughter of the same man Sharon ran off with years ago." Someone screamed. "One of Derek's cousins, I think." The words, "could be siblings," started popping up from the crowd. People threw out phrases like, "This is incest. They have to get an annulment. This is disgusting." Emily almost collapsed, and Derek caught her in his arms. She was trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What does that mean?" she whispered to Derek. Are we brother and sister? Is your mom's old boyfriend my biological father too?" The bride's mother, Linda, was shaking her head violently, but people were crowding around, demanding an answer, flinging accusations and questions. The once perfect row of seats looked like a riot scene, with folks on their feet, some pushing forward, some stepping back. I was so shell-shocked I couldn't speak. Everything was spinning out of control. The officiant tried to restore order by tapping his microphone, calling for everyone to calm down, but the volume was deafening. Henry tried to defend Linda in some twisted way. Or maybe he just wanted to shout more, but the guests drowned him out. I saw Emily run out of the arch area, heading toward the side door to the bridal suite, Derek chasing after her, calling her name. Their wedding day, right after the vow exchange, had turned into an absolute nightmare. For a moment, I wondered if I should follow them, but I noticed Linda stumbling, looking like she might faint. I hurried to her side, trying to hold her up as she kept murmuring, "I'm sorry, Emily, I'm so sorry." Mark, scowling, grabbed his coat and marched out of the room, with Sharon running behind him, telling him to calm down. Chaos, tears, shouting. People started filing out of the hall. My staff tried to salvage some sense of order, but we were in crisis mode, offering water and tissues to those who were in hysterics. Honestly, I'd never in my career seen a wedding meltdown so spectacular and so sudden. Usually, family drama is more subtle, but here, it was like the biggest possible secret had landed in the center of the ceremony, blowing everything to smithereens. About half an hour later, the crowd had thinned. Some folks remained, milling around in shock, not sure whether to leave or wait for news. I learned that Emily and Derek were holed up in a private lounge on the upper floor, refusing to see anyone except each other's best friends. My phone buzzed with calls from people asking if the reception was still happening, if the dinner was canceled. Meanwhile, the florist, the caterer, everyone was in a panic about how to proceed. Eventually, I decided we needed to talk to the bride and groom direct. I tiptoed upstairs to the lounge. Outside, Katie, the maid of honor, was seated on a bench looking drained. She told me Emily had nearly fainted but was stable now, just shaking uncontrollably. Derek was pacing, furious at both sets of parents. I knocked gently, hearing Derek's voice say, "Come in." So I pushed the door open. Emily was on a small sofa, her mascara smudged, hugging a pillow, eyes puffy from crying. Derek stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. They both looked at me with the saddest expressions I'd ever seen. I whispered, "Guys, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. We never wanted anything like this to happen." Derek swallowed hard. "None of this is your fault, Sarah. We just didn't realize how messed up our families really were. Did you know about Miles? I shook my head. I only heard the name from your father earlier, and Katie said something about documents, but I swear I didn't know the significance. I'm so sorry I mentioned someone else when I was trying to keep everyone calm. It just slipped out. Emily shuddered. My dad showed up yesterday wanting to pay for everything because he said he felt guilty. I believed he just wanted to make amends for being absent. Now I know he was never around because he wasn't truly my father. I feel so betrayed. And my mom, she never told me the truth. Derek squeezed her hand. We have to figure out if we're half-siblings, he said quietly. The heartbreak in his voice was palpable. We can't stay married if there's any chance. A tear rolled down Emily's cheek. I love you so much, she whispered to him. I can't stand the thought that all these years, we might share a biological father. In that moment, my heart ached for them. This day, which should have been the pinnacle of their joy, had turned into a traumatic crisis. I told them about the rumor that Miles was involved with Derek's mother Sharon at some point, but apparently that was after Emily was. Still, no one had the timeline pinned down exactly. Emily sobbed. We just need the truth. A DNA test or something. But how do we do that right now? People are waiting downstairs. Derek looked at me with a resignation in his eyes that I'll never forget. Sarah, we can't go on with the reception like nothing happened. The entire wedding is basically ruined. I had to agree. We quickly decided to cancel the formal reception. My staff could let the guests know that there had been a family emergency. Some guests had already left on their own, presumably horrified or just exhausted by the drama. Word spread, people packed up. The dinner was left largely uneaten, except for a few who stayed behind in shock. Meanwhile, Derek and Emily reached out to their closest friends, trying to parse what to do next. I offered them space in the private lounge as long as they needed. That evening, after most people had cleared out, I gathered the venue staff to clean up. We stored the leftover food, tossed the wilted flowers, turned off the lights in the hall that was meant for dancing and celebration. The once glittering arch seemed sad and hollow. I felt personally guilty, wondering if I could have done anything to stop Henry from blowing up, or if I could have handled that key moment differently. But deep down, I knew that truth was always going to come out. It had been simmering for decades. At around 9 at night, Emily and Derek finally emerged, both looking absolutely drained. She had changed out of her gown into a simple sweater and jeans. Derek had taken off his jacket and tie. They made their way to the foyer, where I was standing near the front desk. The entire place had that hollow echo, as though it had never held a big crowd at all. Emily managed a weak smile and Derek cleared his throat. We wanted to say goodbye and thank you, Sarah, he said. We're sorry your staff got caught up in this. It's not your fault. Emily nodded, then looked down. Derek's father told us that Miles might not have even been serious with his mom, so there's a chance it's all a misunderstanding. My mother said the same. She claims she was with Miles only once, and that the timing lines up so that I'm definitely his child. But Derek's mother Sharon had her fling with Miles a couple of years later. So maybe it's just a weird coincidence, but with all the lying, we're not sure. Derek brushed a hand through his hair. We're going to do a DNA test and figure out the paternity situation. If we find out we're not related, we'll stay together. But right now, we can't even look at our parents. We don't know who to trust. My throat felt tight. I hope it works out for you both. You seemed so in love, so genuine. It breaks my heart to see you going through this. Emily stepped forward and, to my surprise, gave me a soft hug. She whispered, thank you for everything you did. We know it was an accident, you saying what you said. This was gonna blow up no matter what. Maybe it's better that it happened now, before we spent years of our marriage in ignorance. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. They walked out into the cold night, leaning on each other's arms, looking so small and fragile. The next couple of weeks were a blur. The fiasco of that wedding spread through local social circles like wildfire. People were gossiping left and right about the incest scare at the big ceremony. I did my best to carry on with the next events, focusing on other couples. But the memory of Emily and Derek kept haunting me. I'd see the bridal arch in the corner of the warehouse where we stored it, and I'd recall that catastrophic day. A month later, I received an unexpected email from Emily. She apologized again for the drama, said she and Derek had parted ways for a few weeks to think it all through, but ultimately they decided to stay together. She revealed that the DNA tests came back confirming they were not half-siblings. Apparently, the timelines matched up, so Derek's mother was involved with Miles at a different point, not overlapping with Linda's pregnancy. So biologically, there was zero chance that they shared a father. But in her words, it still feels like our parents' betrayal is something we'll never fully get over. She wrote that they'd quietly gotten legally recognized as husband and wife. The license was already signed on the day of the wedding, but had no desire to throw a celebration anytime soon. They planned to move away from their hometown, try to start fresh, away from prying eyes and painful history. It was bittersweet. On one hand, I felt relieved they weren't actually related, that their love story might have a future. But on the other, I knew how deeply the betrayal by their parents would mark them. For me, the whole ordeal was a harsh reminder that weddings aren't always about uniting families in joy. Sometimes they expose the biggest lies or secrets a family's been hiding for years. I realized just how little control I truly have over the events I manage. You can orchestrate the table settings, the music cues, the bouquet toss, but you can't stop a father from bursting out with a truth bomb if that's what he's determined to do. And you definitely can't erase decades of deceit with a pretty floral arrangement. To this day, I still replay that moment when Henry stood up and said he couldn't let them proceed without the truth. And I wonder if there was anything I could have done different. But I come to the same conclusion each time. That secret was always a ticking time bomb. My slip of the tongue only lit the fuse a bit faster. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else or some other telltale sign. Since then, I've approached my job with a little more caution. I'm still dedicated to helping couples plan the day of their dreams, but I've also become acutely aware that I'm stepping into a swirl of family politics, emotional baggage, unspoken resentments, and sometimes horrifying secrets. When I'm coordinating the details or looking at the seating chart, I pay attention to subtle hints of tension. If a father and mother haven't spoken in years, if a cousin is mysteriously left off the guest list, if the groom's father warns me about an uninvited name, there's usually a reason, a big reason. But I can only do so much. I've even had couples who joked about having major family skeletons, but those jokes always carry a kernel of truth. I suppose the biggest lesson I learned from Emily and Derek's wedding is that no matter how thoroughly you plan or how much money you spend, the truth always finds a way out when it's ready. Sometimes it tears families apart, and sometimes it forces them to confront the past. In rare cases, it might bring them closer together. In Emily and Derek's case, I think it made them realize that their love wasn't a fairy tale. They saw each other's heartbreak and still chose to hold on. That might be more real than any vow I try to keep in touch with them. From what I last heard, they moved to a mid-sized coastal town, found an apartment near the ocean. Derek works at a software company. Emily's pursuing a nursing degree. They're taking it slow, focusing on building trust with each other, and deciding later if they'll have some small vow renewal far away from the drama of their hometown. Emily told me she's had a few short, strained phone calls with her parents, but she doesn't think she'll ever fully forgive them for the years of secrecy. Derek's relationship with his father, Mark, remains complicated at best, since Mark was more concerned about the possibility of incest than comforting his own son. But at least they've severed themselves from the swirling mass of anger that day in the banquet hall. As for me, every time I walk through the venue's main doors, I remember seeing Emily bolt out of the ceremony in her wedding gown, or the looks of shock on hundreds of faces when the father of the bride decided to blow the lid off the family secret. I can't pretend it didn't happen. It sits with me, reminding me that the perfect decor, the perfect timeline, the perfect music selection can all be obliterated by a few words. Yet, I'm still here. I'm still managing weddings. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, or maybe I believe that most families, for all their quirks, manage to hold it together when it counts. This story, though, remains the prime example I offer whenever people assume wedding planning is all fluff and happiness. I tell them it can be intense, stressful, even tragic at times. Some folks think I'm exaggerating, but I only have to recall that single horrifying afternoon. The tears, the screams, the hush that fell over the crowd when the father declared, "She's not my daughter." I'll never forget how it felt. The electricity of shock that erupted in the absolute heartbreak in Emily's eyes. And I'll never forget how a quiet slip of my own tongue contributed to the chaos. In the end, we can't control the truth. Once it's out, it doesn't care about timing or decorum. It doesn't care about the white dress, the roses, the neatly pressed suits. It's indiscriminate, unstoppable. And somehow, ironically, there's a clarity. I hope that wherever Emily and Derek are right now, they're finding their peace. I hope they learned that even the most painful revelations can be a twisted kind of blessing. Better to know the truth than live under a lie, especially if that lie could haunt them later. I don't know if they'll ever fully trust their parents again, but at least they can trust each other, now that it's all out in the open. I wish I could say I never worry about stepping into a similar minefield again, but realistically, families are messy, and as long as I keep organizing these events, I'm bound to see another fiasco eventually. Still, I've never again experienced something on that scale of raw emotional destruction in front of 200 wedding guests. It was a perfect storm of timing, hidden paternity, old affairs, unresolved guilt, and personal vendettas. A swirl of secrets that collided at the exact worst moment, right when the couple exchanged vows. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Henry had held it in just a minute long. The officiant would have pronounced them husband and wife. They would have kissed. and maybe they'd be smiling in photos. But eventually, somewhere down the line, that secret about Emily's real father and the rumor of a shared parent with Derek would have surfaced. Could it have been gentler in a private setting? Maybe. But that day taught me something essential. Once a lie is big enough, it tends to explode in public. It's only a matter of when. If anything, the story of Emily and Derek is a testament to the resilience of love, which somehow survived the worst day possible, at least for them. They got the official confirmation that they're not siblings, put the rumors to rest, and decided to move forward. I can't say the same for their parents, who remain stuck in the webs of their own regrets and guilt. Every now and then, I'll get a text from Emily. She'll talk about how the ocean air is refreshing, how she's adjusting to nursing school, how Derek's job is going. She never fails to mention their healing, day by day. She jokes that if they ever renew their vows, I better be there, hopefully with a little less drama. I told her I'd fly out anywhere for them, and I meant it. Because despite all the pain, I still want to see them share their joy, on their own terms, with no more secrets lurking in the background. Maybe that's the happy ending they'll get, maybe it's not. But at least now it's in their hands, not in the hands of people who lied about Emily's parentage for 2 decades. And as for me, I'm still here, at the same venue, watching new couples promise each other forever, walking them through color palettes and menu choices, crossing my fingers that if there are any ticking time bombs, they won't detonate until long after the wedding day. It's a strange profession, being a wedding manager, because you're half event planner and half emotional caretaker. You see the best and worst of people. I've seen families stand strong behind the bride and groom, and I've seen them tear each other apart in a single afternoon. People ask, doesn't that scare you away from marriage? And I say no. It just reminds me how complicated love can be, how it's never just about 2 people. It's about the histories and secrets they carry. Emily and Derek's wedding was the single biggest lesson in that truth. If you want to protect yourself from heartbreak, either avoid big family weddings or make sure all skeletons are out of the closet before the day arrives.